What y'all think? Talk to me. What's going on? What's going on? Welcome to the channel. I got a few minutes, so I just want to see what was going on. What y'all think about this Diddy stuff? What is going on? What's up, chat? What's up, chat? This is crazy, y'all. I ain't even gonna hold you. I low-key want to see if I can get some coverage real quick. I don't know, y'all. I'm trying to see if I can get this live thing going. I think I found something. What's good? What's good? What y'all think, man? You think the government did what they were supposed to do? What y'all think gonna happen? Go, there we go. Y'all hear me better now? You can hear me? Hold on. What's up? What's up? What's up? Talk to me. How y'all feeling? What y'all think? This is crazy. Gel is applied to the site of pain, penetrating deep through the skin to the joint, reducing intense pain caused by inflammation so you can move. What's up? What's up? What up, y'all? What you think? What you think about this just all this shit, bro? What you think about this shit? This Diddy shit, man. You got found not guilty on
she's pleased that again that the jury has found him liable, guilty of 2 federal crimes. What was her reaction? And I've issued a statement as well on our Twitter as well. Her reaction is what I think that's Cassie's lawyer. She was pleased that he's been found guilty and held responsible of 2 federal crimes, something that he's never been held responsible in his entire life. And she's happy that in November of 2023 she came forward and shined a light on this and brought other people forward who have various civil claims. And
I don't think they did a really good job at presenting their case. I guess
I can't
it was a freak ass nigga.
What was the question?
Yeah. Your reaction to what happened?
The reaction is that we're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for 2 federal crimes, something that he's never faced in his life. He still faces substantial jail time. Of course, we would have liked to have seen a conviction on the sex crimes in RICO, but we understand beyond a reasonable doubt is a high standard, and we're just pleased that he still faces substantial jail time. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Doug Wigdor, Wigdor. Well, each is cases up to 10 years on each. I'm not sure what the sentencing guidelines are given the various different things, but I'll leave that up to the government and the defense to argue. But I feel confident in saying he still faces substantial incarceration.
How would you feel if he walks out on bail?
Well, that's up to the judge. I don't have a personal vested interest in this case. Whatever the appropriate thing to do under the law is what should be done. And at the end of the day, he needs to be sentenced pursuant to the guidelines and pursuant to what the law is. My understanding of that is that he faces significant incarceration. So thank you very much.
Thank you. He's the attorney for Cassie Ventura.
Yeah, Victor.
Okay, yeah, that was Cassie's attorney that just spoke. I guess I couldn't really say too much. If you want to join, let me know. I'll send you the link.
Oh, just chill over here.
This is the Associated Press's coverage. What y'all think? What y'all think? I don't think the government did a good job. The FBI did a good job at posting their argument. They definitely proved he a freaky ass nigga. Freak ass boy. He definitely a freak. And he definitely was on camera assaulting Cassie, you know what I'm saying? But they definitely proved the prostitution.
How are you?
Anything you want the public to know?
Not yet. We'll be saying something soon. Thanks.
Okay.
Watch your step.
Can you share your reaction?
I don't know who that is. But yeah, they proved the prostitution. That's what he got convicted of. They had the prostitutes there.
Is he actually speaking?
And said the things that said all that freaky shit he was doing, but that's the illegal part is the prostitution. It wasn't illegal, all the freaky shit he was doing.
Thank you. Watch your step. I got your back.
Cannot do that.
Well, you just want
We
to
may be
it off.
good.
Yes, the team.
Are you feeling good?
Thank you.
Federal court, you got to be feeling good. They have almost unlimited resources.
Watch your step.
Thank you.
It looked like his kids is coming out.
It could have been nobody.
I'm watching CNN too. I'm about to see if I can hook my TV up to here.
Did you see Catherine?
I don't think that the court is the best place to learn these lessons. And that includes our health. I don't think that he's in prison really thinking about the harm that he caused women. I don't. But we're going to talk more because as Stream Hampton was talking about, it is so true. This is all in real time during standby. We're going to keep talking as well. Paris Canal, of course, is here. We're not going to forget about the tremendous work that she has been doing and how important it is. Then we're going to come back to everyone. It's fluid right now. It's in real time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to go back to Pamela Brown, and we'll check in the situation. But while we're in the situation, courthouse.
You are in quite the situation there outside that courthouse in New York. Wow. I mean, just hearing both of your perspectives is so illuminating. You've been there from the beginning. And actually, before I let you go, Kara, again, I just want you to bring us inside that courtroom as the verdict was read. I mean, this really was the best realistic scenario, if you will, for Sean Diddy Combs and his family who were inside that room.
Pam, it absolutely was. The charges that he was acquitted on were the most serious. They carried the potential life sentence. So when the jury said not guilty to those counts, you saw the release from weeks that this family has carried with them. You heard yes coming from some of the kids. You heard a woof after the first sex trafficking count was found not guilty. There was just so much relief. And then once the jury exited the courtroom, Mark Agnifilo, Combs' attorney, had argued for his release, saying all of his family's here. Any one of these people can sign, support him so that you can be assured he's not going to do anything else. He's learned any lesson he's going to learn. He realizes he's got a second chance on life because the stakes here were so high. Then once the judge was off the bench, Combs was able, he's still in custody, but he was able to turn to his family, and his family members were all cheering. They broke into applause. He turned to his mom. Well, he said to everyone, I love you. He turned to his mom. He said, Mom, I love you. And they just said, I love you, I love you, and I love you as he was brought out of the room. And just it erupted into applause. His 2 rows of family members were so elated by this because of the huge relief. I saw some people dabbing their eyes with tears of relief. And then his lawyers, they were embracing each other. They were slapping each other on the back. There were chants of dream team from some of the family members looking at the attorneys. One was over hugging the family members, crying. There was such this sense of euphoria from the side that they got not convicted of these most serious charges because he could have faced decades in prison.
And Karen, the mom yesterday, they talk almost every day in this courthouse. What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, they have a very close interaction every day. Yesterday, she seemed to be summoning him over more before he was brought in and out of the court because he can't stay there because he's in custody. And he was reassuring her
behind the courtroom.
Yeah, the marshals lead him out. They bring him downstairs to his cell, and that is where he has to wait. And so he kept reassuring her, saying, it's going to be all right. I'm going to be all right. And he said to his family when he was leaving, stay strong. I'm hoping to come home soon. So they are really putting a lot. And there will be more proceedings this afternoon to decide whether or not he will get bail, whether he will be released as soon as today to go home to his family with some conditions.
What are we waiting for? Those letters to the judge?
Yeah, there's a 1 o'clock deadline for the parties to submit their best argument. The prosecution's opposing this. They said even though he was acquitted of the serious counts, the judge should not forget that conduct. They say that he's still a violent person and that he is a flight risk. So they are still arguing that he should be detained. The judge is saying, I want to know what the case law is. Has anyone who's been convicted of Mann Act, the prosecution charge, been denied bail? And so Combs' lawyer is saying release him on $1 million bail. The judge wants this in writing. He said we'll have everyone back later today. No time has yet been set. But then the judge is going to make a decision. He said he'll decide today. And so the question is, does Combs walk out of here a free man at some point today or in the next few days, or does he stay in custody until he's sentenced?
Pam, you've been to law school. I mean, well, you guys know, first of all, this man was listed in Forbes at one point, I think recently, as having a net worth of $400 million. It's almost $500 million with all the issues that are happening. $1 million bail would be what my father would call chop change when it comes to a lot of things, if in fact he's released. But you guys know, Wolf, Pam, this might very well be this generation's OJ trial.
Yeah, I remember covering that trial too. It's very dramatic, these verdicts that are coming in right now. I want to bring in CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honey and CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams. You're here with me. And for those viewers who are just tuning in, let's review these 5 charges, convicted on 3 of them, acquitted on 2 of them. Racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. That was the most serious charge, facing potentially life in prison. Sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, not guilty. That involved Cassie Ventura, not guilty on that. 3rd charge, transportation to engage in prostitution. It's a lesser charge, guilty on that charge. It does carry a 10-year maximum sentence. The fourth charge, sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion. Another victim, number 2, Jane, as she was called, not guilty. The fifth charge, transportation to engage in prostitution, pertains to victim number 2, Jane, guilty. So 3 guilty, 2 not guilty. We know the results, the verdicts. We don't know the sentencing. That's going to be up to the judge, right?
It will. Now, certainly, as he said, each of those
3 not guilty, 2 guilty.
3 not guilty, 2 guilty. Now, each of the 2 guilty counts carry a maximum 10-year sentence. Now, there will be a complicated formula of working out his criminal history, other acts that he was charged with, and so on. But that's what you're looking at there. Now, certainly, very few people are ever sentenced to the top of the statutory maximum. So we should get the 10-year or 20-year figure out of our hands. But he'll go to jail for some time.
It might be up to the judge.
It is the judge's discretion and decision there. Now, sort of pull back. It's important to note that the jury split up the charges here into sort of more complicated and less complicated ones, more fraught ones versus less fraught ones. A racketeering conspiracy, which would have, in effect, foreign prosecutors that have prosecutors establish a criminal enterprise being directed by Shepherd Code. They just did not find that. Also, the acts of setbacks like those foreign forces they couldn't find. What was clearer throughout this trial were acts of prostitution that were supported by airplane records, payments, and so on. Information that would just be hard to deny. There were sex acts. No one disputes that. And they were paid for. And there's a paper trail linking the defendant to them. That was far more straightforward for the prosecution to prove compared to some of the other ones.
On the 2 guilty charges, the judge, when he decides 10-year maximum sentence, he can run that concurrently or simultaneously or whatever. It's up to the judge. But another factor that the judge has to consider were there any previous convictions of these kinds of charges.
Right, of any charges, he can consider the defendant's criminal history and also uncharged conduct, other information in his record that's worth considering. It is a complex formula, and I could not, as we sit here today, try and speculate as to what he's going to get. Now, certainly, even the decision of whether one would concurrently would be, was it the same act or 2 discrete acts, and would you sentence them at once on top of each other or in succession, and that's a fact of the judgment.
Were you surprised, as I was, that the jury came back? Originally, they couldn't decide on the racketeering charge, the most serious charge, facing potentially life in prison. They couldn't decide, but then this morning they decided pretty quickly.
I'm not surprised. We were talking about this, Ellie and I, in the green room this morning. So, yeah, sometimes they change their mind. Juries do. They say that they're deadlocked and then come back after they're directed by the judge. I'm surprised at the speed with which it happened. That by late in the afternoon yesterday, they were hopelessly deadlocked, and within, I think, 45 minutes of being there this morning, that they come to an agreement. It happens. Juries do one any number of factors. Just being told by the judge, you have somewhat of an obligation here under the law to attempt to find unanimity, whether that's agreeing to convict or agreeing to acquit. So go back, do your best. I know it's hard. The law is hard. These are those difficult issues that people don't disagree. But I think sometimes we don't have to that the jury, the members of the jury, they just want to go home. So they make decisions more quickly. It's funny, it's consistent that the jury lunchtime isn't necessarily a jury to any number of factors that could force their hand in terms of getting them to get to yes or no, whatever the case may be.
Today showed that he kind of woke up, not knowing if he would spend the rest of his life in prison, and now he can walk out of that courthouse. Today, potentially, right? What is the likelihood of that?
Right, it's a bit of a paradox because here we have Sean Collins, who has just been convicted of 2 federal felonies, and for all practical purposes, he has won. He has defeated the Southern District of New York, which court there. They don't like losing in court. They don't lose in court a lot. And there's no way to spin this. This is a devastating setback for the SDNY. Sean Combs was looking at the possibility of a 15-year mandatory minimum, potentially up to life. Based on the more serious charges, where the jury found not guilty. Now he's looking at a much, much lower sentence. And to that point, there is a realistic chance that the judge will let Sean Combs walk out today or maybe tomorrow if it takes him some time to post bail. Here's why. The judge is doing a mental calculation right now. Okay, you're going to hear from the prosecution, and Karen and Laura reported the prosecution is saying, Well, he still faces up to 20 years in prison. That is just a flex by the prosecution. That is nowhere near realistic as some people are saying. First of all, there are two 10-year max terms. They are going to merge. They are not going to be run what we call consecutively, back to back. They're closely related to one another. I had this argument 1,000 times for us. This sentence is all going to merge. So realistically, the max is 10 years. If you're looking at somebody who's been convicted only of what we call a man, meaning non-coercive, non-forcible, interstate prostitution, essentially ordering a prostitution, a lot of times that results in no prison time. That would take the Sean Combs out of it, take the celebrity out of it, take all the other evidence out of it. In an ordinary case where that was the only kind of conviction, you could have a realistic argument for probation here. Now, Sean Combs has been behind bars for coming up on a year. He was locked up last summer, sorry, 2024. And so the judge is thinking, well, is going to be thinking, if there's a realistic chance I'm going to sentence him to time served, meaning the year or so he's already served, or maybe a little bit more than that, I should maybe let him out now on bail. Is he a flight risk? Is he really going to take off now that he's not paid?
Okay, so I tried to be cool, y'all, but it backfired. Backfired on your boy. It's all good. Just gotta figure it out. That's all. But yeah, man, tell me what you think, man. Talk to me. Talk to me. Welcome to Old Wells World. A little wake and bake. Nothing crazy. Maybe I don't need the audio. Well, I do want the audio because I want y'all to hear. I want y'all to hear what they're saying. Like I want to hear what they're saying, but for the most part, they saying that the judge is going to make a final argument. The judge wants the letters from everybody for the final argument for him to be released. He got found out guilty on a lot of things. The most serious things he got found out guilty on. He got found guilty on prostitution, which they clearly the FBI or the feds, they clearly capitalized on that. So they proved prostitution. I don't know. You know, I want to hear some of y'all's opinion on how do you feel like the government did a good job of painting the narrative of him, racketeering and holding people against their will and things like that, kidnapping and things, things that he got found not guilty of. They definitely proved that he's a freaky ass nigga though, for sure. For sure. Can't give that up. That's it for sure.
Could be starting any minute. I don't know who Lauren Crime is, but they had it on the freaking
On the clip itself.
on the clip.
Oh,
So it's
that's
like
why
yeah. So it was turning the clip.
I was turning the clip.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to do it.
People were over here switching it. This thing doesn't weigh enough to turn the clip. They were getting another stand.
I did it. I turned it a few more times. It should be fine.
I'm cool.
Who? This guy's a pain in the fucking ass.
They were getting out of the stand too, so hold on.
Yeah, I don't know how. I just saw him.
Yeah.
Two so it doesn't fall over. So
Yeah.
Two hit the ground.
Put this here. Hold on. Let's get.
So here, I got a knuckle right here. We can maybe. Maybe we can just like hook to this somehow. So they can. How much ammo time? It's gotta bring this down a bit.
There you go.
Line it up, big hole.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, that's not gonna go anywhere.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I wish I could hear what they were saying, man. Well, it might be best that y'all don't for real. What y'all think? What y'all think? This nigga scared to talk about it. He's guilty on prostitution. Definitely praying for that that cuck lifestyle. Definitely was paying. For sure.
This one? Check, 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 1, 2, check, 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 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check. Oh shit. Anyone want a mic check? Check, 1, 2, check.
There's no way that's live, bro.
All right, I'm gonna do a mic check. Check, 1, 2, mic check. Check, 1, 2, 3. Check, 1, 2, 3. Gonna do a mic check. Let me know if everyone's there. One more time. Mic check. Check, 1, 2. Everyone feel good? Want it again? Want it again? I know it's hot, bro. We'll get there. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, check, check.
Defense appeal based on the conviction on the 2 transportation for prostitution counts, and I expect that there will be. There will also be post-trial motions before they even get to appeal, motions to this judge to overturn the verdict based on the lack of evidence. Those are very hard to win. I've won some of them before, but it's an uphill battle, and it's very, very hard to win those motions. But I expect that there will be a round of motions by the defense on the transportation for prostitution counts, and I expect if he does get sentenced, when he does get sentenced on those counts, there will be an appeal.
Might one of those attempts to overturn it be the fact that the juror had to be dismissed in the middle of the trial?
There are many things that I think can be appealed. It could be the juror who was initially living in the Bronx, who then was living in New Jersey, who was dismissed. There's the juror who apparently didn't understand the instructions the other day and may not have spoke English very well. There obviously were other issues that happened during the trial, some evidentiary issues. You know, one of the main things and why the government went so aggressive with the RICO racketeering charge is it allowed them to get in other evidence that they otherwise would not have gotten into evidence. And so there may be appeals based on the evidentiary decisions that the judge allowed. There was a lot of very damaging, very prejudicial evidence that came in against Combs that the judge allowed in because of the racketeering charge. Now, you can't look back in hindsight and say, well, he was found not guilty of the racketeering charge. That evidence should not have come in. But I do think that there will be an evaluation of the evidence that was permitted in, and there will be some appellate issues based on that.
So a little bit more about the judge. Arun Subramanian, born in 1979. He was appointed in April of 2023 by then President Joe Biden. And it's not uncommon, given his experience to this point, to reach out to another judge, right? Does this happen all the time?
Yeah, I mean, there's always behind-door conversations between judges and chambers, right? They have colleagues, they've got more senior mentors on the bench. So it would not be surprising. We'll never know. And that's the thing, is that will never become public. But it would not be surprising to me if he's consulting with his more senior colleagues to find out, what should I do here? He's also consulting with his law clerks. He's also looking at the law on cases that involve convictions of this.
Precedents, like you said, the Mann Act before.
Correct.
You know,
he specifically asked the prosecutors to submit in their submission by 1 p.m. precedent to hold people in custody when they're solely convicted of Mann Act violations. And I think that'll be telling to see what their letter is that they submit.
I know that we talked a little bit about how much it costs U.S. taxpayers for this trial, but Mark Agnifilo, how much does he get an hour? How much did this cost Diddy?
It cost Diddy millions, multiple millions, probably 8 figures. Diddy hired a great team. He's got very experienced defense attorneys, and he's got a large team from many different firms, and he definitely spent tens of millions of dollars on his defense.
So he had different firms working together?
Oh, absolutely. I think he had at least 6 or 7 different firms working on this case, multiple attorneys from multiple firms. He definitely spent a lot of money in the defense of this case, and it worked, right?
If it kept you from getting a life sentence, you probably are thinking it's money well spent on your side of the case. One thing I just thought about,
exact outcome that we want.
You don't know know,
we are grateful
for
to
sure
the
because you're
jury
not there. But I
for,
wonder, where's Diddy right now? Like physically, where is he? And where are the jurors? What has happened to them?
So the jurors have been discharged. The judge had said to them, go back to the jury room. I have to deal with some legal issues with the lawyers, and then I'm going to come back and speak to you. And he actually told them, you don't have to speak to the press. I actually advise you not to speak to the press.
I don't like when they say that, actually.
I agree.
In this day and age, I'm telling you, I would be on their side.
I know,
people.
but
It's hard to stay anonymous, and people are crazy.
I know, but don't you want to know what happened in that
I don't think we have to
deliberation
know.
room?
I think, again, in this day and age, people are too nuts to have you stand at a podium, put your name out there. People will dox you and find out your address and where your kids work, that kind of thing.
It's not that glamorous. We are literally running behind them as they are leaving because we don't, unless you're in the courtroom every day, you don't know who they are, so you have to make mental notes, blue tie, blue jacket, and you have to chase these people, and that's what we do when they happen.
But I want to know is different than I
She
need
was
to know.
graceful.
And I
She
think
shined
that
a light
people's
on
personal
this. Jane
safety is
read
too
the
important.
complaint. She
In the
came
world that
forward.
we live in,
Many other people have
I
come
would
forward. They're
not
going to be
suggest that.
seeking
But it's up to them, obviously.
Of course, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple days you hear certain leaks from certain jurors learning about the deliberations. That happens in most of these high-profile cases these days, is you learn after the fact. I wouldn't be surprised also if the judge's deputies got the jurors out of a back entrance so that they escorted them out through an entrance so that the press wasn't bothering them today. This judge was very careful to make sure that the press was not finding out the identity of these jurors, and I wouldn't be surprised if they escorted them out a back entrance and that those jurors are already on their way home.
So this is what I'm going to say. Anybody who's watching, who's friends or family with any of the jurors, we will put them on in silhouette, change their voices.
You can advocate for that. I am not supportive of
we would
that.
put their story out there without putting their identity. Yeah. It's happened in the past. We've done it for tens of years.
Go ahead. I'm staying out of this one.
I know, but I just think that, don't you want to know how?
Because you want to know something doesn't mean you need to know. The jury, what they told you is what you need to know. That's just my opinion. I just don't believe in that.
Now, sometimes they do talk. There have
some
been
of them write
instances,
books
they will talk to us, even with the presence of an escort who then just steps off. It's like, well, it's in your hands now. So we do get that, sometimes.
Real quick, where's Diddy?
So Diddy right now is in a holding cell at the courthouse waiting to be brought back into court at whatever time the court reconvenes.
All right. Arthur Idell is standing by as well. Arthur, I'm sorry.
I just want to tell you, regarding what the topic you're talking about, jurors, I never learned more about my craft than when I speak to jurors after a trial, whether that was when I was a prosecutor and things that they focused on when I was a prosecutor about, I believed your witness when he identified the defendant sitting at the chair, because he didn't just say the guy sitting at the chair. He said the guy sitting at the chair with the pink shirt and the button-down collars and a little bit of a stain on his shoulder. And he's like, once we heard that he was so detail-oriented, that's when we knew he was telling the truth. Like, I would have never thought of that in a million years. And as a defense attorney, it's the same thing. You get to ask them, like, what worked? What didn't work? What resonated with you? What didn't resonate with you? Whether I got the verdict on the case that I wanted or I didn't want, it's almost like you guys, Kurt and Rosanna, like speaking to your audience. Like, what'd you like about that segment? What didn't you like about that segment? Was this good? Was that, should we change this? So I love, as a lawyer, to speak to the jurors. I understand what both of you are saying regarding whether they should speak or not, but it is fascinating to hear what happens when you put 12 strangers in a room together for 2 months and you say, don't talk about what we're working on. Don't talk about this project for 2 months until a couple of days ago when they allowed you to talk about it. And then 12 strangers have to agree on judging another human being's life and lifestyle, etc. I mean, it is a very, from a human perspective, it is fascinating. And I will tell you this, Kurt, your viewers, I agree. I hear what you're saying in terms of protecting the jurors themselves as individuals. I got you. But from viewers' perspectives, from a human perspective, it is fascinating to hear what happened when they went into the jury room and how things played out.
I understand I'm in the minority on this set, in this newsroom. I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm just not in favor of it. But hey, one man's opinion.
Okay,
That's it.
apparently Arthur Chan is tweeting that a Sprinter van pulled to the closed garage on the Pearl Street side, and that's where the jurors, it's speculated the jurors left from that entrance, and I guess they dismissed them. They probably got them to another place that's safe from the prying eyes of the press.
You also pointed out, Rosanna, that the New York Times was saying that Psalm 11 is what Sean Combs read. I looked it up. It's a declaration of trust in God's adversity and a reminder of his justice against enemies, so of his children. So.
Well, it basically says, I put my trust in you, which is if anybody is going through hardship, you know that you need help from a divine individual to help you get through that, and you have to trust that God's going to take care of you. And that's what Diddy was reading as the verdict came in.
I think
today.
some people will have a hard time looking at that video and thinking that God sided with Diddy.
Kurt, I was going to ask you this, because the
I'm just saying, that's the honest truth.
But no, that and just the other allegations that came out. I mean, this man's reputation, has taken a serious hit in the court of public opinion. Seth is nodding his head. The term freak offs is now something that all of us cannot.
And listen, I'm never going to look at baby oil again. All right.
You were nodding in agreement about the reputation.
I agree that the reputational harm, he can never get his reputation back. And I agree with everything that Arthur said, right? Speaking to the jurors is an invaluable part of our craft. And you learn things that happened in the jury deliberation room that the lawyers weren't even focused on. I've spoken to jurors, and I hear that they were focused on these issues, and I'm like, I didn't even think that that was an issue in this case. And the jurors focus on things that it's a great study of human psychology, as Arthur was talking about. You learn so much from speaking to the jurors, and obviously the judge, by escorting the jurors out, has prohibited the parties from speaking to it. Obviously, the parties are very busy right now with preparing their letters to file with the judge by 1 p.m. today, so they probably are preoccupied anyway, and they may try to reach out to the jurors at a later point. But it's always harder to speak to them at a later date. It's easiest when it's fresh, when they're leaving the courthouse, when you could speak to them. That's when they most want to be spoken to. When they move on with their lives, it's less likely that they want to be spoken to about a case like this. But like I said, I would expect in the next couple of days we'll hear some leaks, we'll hear some reports of some of the jurors, and some of the jurors may go on TV, like Rosanna asked. They may be public. They may want to discuss what the deliberation room looked like.
And we can hide their identity and voice. We've done that before in the past. But I think people are curious about how the deliberations went. Was there fighting over the RICO count? Because yesterday we thought we had a hung jury on the RICO count.
Yeah, and it was a fairly quick verdict for a 2-month trial, right? We had basically a day plus of deliberations, right? Yesterday was the only full day. This morning they deliberated for maybe an hour, and on Monday they deliberated for a very short amount of time. So it was a fairly quick deliberation for a 2-month trial, and so it would be curious to hear what was happening in that jury room. As Rosanna pointed out, yesterday they did indicate that there were jurors dug in on both sides of the aisle on the RICO racketeering count. So clearly they were persuaded by the judge's instructions, and clearly they were persuaded by their fellow jurors to go back and deliberate honestly and fairly, and they were convinced that he was not guilty of that count.
Well, even Adala's case with Weinstein too. Remember the jury? They were basically fighting. We were like, we can't deal with this. That would have been really interesting just to get the temperature, take a barometer of what that was.
Arthur, are you there? Did you ever talk to?
I'm here, and what Seth was saying. What we also have to factor in there is they went home last night, and when people go home, right? You don't know what happens. I mean, first of all, I know they're not supposed to read or hear anything about the case, but a case of this magnitude, it's almost impossible. You get into the cab, all of a sudden, you hear this screen in the cab. You go on Facebook and there's something about the case, so you don't know their family members, or they just have a good night's sleep and they clear their head and they say, all right, let me rethink this. So anytime you go out overnight, you can see jurors change their minds. And in fact, in the Weinstein case, when they said they were hung, and one juror said, look, I'm done. I'm not going back in there. The judge broke for the day at 3 p.m, said, everyone go home, let's cool off, and we'll come back tomorrow and see what happens. And when he came back tomorrow, the juror was like, I'm done. I have my verdict. They're trying to change my mind. I'm not going to allow them to change my mind. I heard the evidence, and that was it. The judge had to declare a mistrial. So, but again, Weinstein's case, Puffy's case, we considered a win that we got Weinstein. There were 3 women. We found guilty only of 1. The other 2, there was no decision on. Well, 1 he was not guilty, 1 there's no decision. The same with Puffy, right? He beat most of the counts. But it all really comes down to the sentencing. If the judge in Weinstein sentences him to 10, 15 years, a 73-year-old man with cancer, diabetes, heart disease, then, you know, it was a win for the lawyers because we beat the charges. I won the appeal, but it's not really a win for the individual. If this judge goes off the wall for whatever reason, he wants to make a name for himself, and he says, I'm sentencing you to 10 years, 12 years, 5 years on each count to run consecutively, I don't think Puff Daddy is going to say, oh, I won the case. Yeah, he's not facing a 15-year mandatory minimum where he'd have to do at least 12 and a half maybe, or maybe a little less to get in the halfway house. You know, all of these get-out-of-jail-free cards do not apply to sex crimes cases. So the first step back, all things that allow people to go to a camp, to be in a more luxurious camp fed, they don't apply when you're for sex crimes cases. So he beat the top counts. Fantastic job by the defense. If the judge is the one who gets to write the last chapter here. The judge says, I'm sentencing you to time served and 5 years probation. It's an enormous victory for the defense, an enormous blow for the prosecution. If the judge says, I'm sentencing you to 15 years, 10 on one and 5 on the other to run consecutively, because I heard all of the evidence. And the judge is allowed to take into consideration the evidence that he heard that he was, even though he was acquitted on. The judge is allowed to look at the totality of the circumstances surrounding this individual and his potential to be a danger to society, to recommit these kinds of crimes. So he can take all of that into account. So we shall see. If the judge lets him out today, it's a good indication he's not going to bang him out. If the judge doesn't let him out today, it remains to be seen.
All right, well, we should have some answers to that in a couple of hours. They have to file their paperwork by 1 o'clock, and then the judge will make a decision. Arthur, stay on hold for just a second. I want to check in with Lisa Evers outside the courtroom again. Lisa.
Your correspondent, right? Hey, Curtin Rowe, we're here. Curtin Rowe, we're here at outside federal court where we've been all morning. I'm joined right now by extra senior correspondent Mona Kosar Abdi, and she's been following this case every single day, and we're going to get some reaction about the entertainment community. Mona, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Is there a certain prevailing trend among the entertainment community that you're hearing in response to this verdict?
I think it's too early right now to hear the responses, but what we do know is immediately once it was clear that Diddy was under investigation, I think actually before then, when we saw Cassie Ventura's lawsuit and read some of the disturbing allegations that she made against Diddy, and then there was that hotel attack video that we saw that was really disturbing, a lot of people started distancing themselves from the mogul. And this was somebody who, you know, through some of the most lavish A-list Hollywood parties where anyone from Donald Trump to Leonardo DiCaprio to the who's who of Hollywood used to attend, but nobody seemed to come to his defense. The only person towards the end was Kanye West, who actually made an appearance and tried to get into the courtroom during one day of the trial, but it seemed like a lot of people were just silent and, if anything, distancing themselves from Diddy.
And he's somebody, he was a celebrity. There's many famous movie stars, but you don't see them out at clubs or famous restaurants or out at these big events, these big award shows and that type of event. Were you surprised by how quickly he was shunned by the A-listers?
I was, because this is someone who has made a big impact. He made careers as well. His name is attached to the Notorious B.I.G., to 112, to Mary J. Blige. He also made hits with like Mariah Carey. So he was someone who was a hit maker, who was associated to a lot of celebrities and was buddies with Jay-Z. He was at the Rock Nation brunches with Jay-Z regularly. And so to see immediately that nobody was willing to come to his defense. But I think there were rumors for a long time that he was an eccentric figure and that people did not want to excuse his behavior, but he was somebody to know at the time.
And did you get a sense that some of the people in the entertainment, some of the A-listers, B-listers, or even C-listers or whatever, maybe were looking at their own behavior, taking a second look after these charges, going, wait a minute, if they can go after somebody of that stature, I mean, a billionaire, one of the most famous men in the world, they can go after anybody.
Yeah, so a lot of, it was the defense's angle definitely to say that the prosecution was overstepping. The government was putting crime scene tape in his bedroom. They also mentioned that there was another rapper who the woman who was going by the pseudonym Jane was familiar with. They said he's another big rapper who was into that lifestyle. And that's how the defense was categorizing that this is a lifestyle. He was into the swingers lifestyle and he had non-conventional sex. But that shouldn't mean that the government should go into his bedroom and put crime scene tape, and they kept saying that he was overstepping. And so I do think that if he was convicted of the sex trafficking charge, that it might put a lot of people on alert about, well, what if I was flying in someone or having threesomes? But I think there was a lot more to it, and a lot more that the prosecution was using to support their case. But like you said, it did definitely ring bells in Hollywood.
And then a lot of people, too, once that video was released and the world saw that Cassie beating video, even though those weren't specific charges to this case, it was a very important building block for the prosecution. But was there a sense people were just like, okay, that does it. All the stuff I've been hearing is true.
Yeah, which is why I think that even though now he has been acquitted of 3 of the serious charges, and he's still convicted, he's still looking at some serious prison time, I don't think that Hollywood is going to be welcoming him with open arms, because that video was so disturbing and so brutal, and the defense didn't really have a defense for him. They said, listen, we know he's not a good person sometimes, that he was violent towards Cassie, that he was abusive. Their argument was that that doesn't mean that he's guilty of RICO and sex trafficking, but he still has to answer to that. And we all saw that video, and his apology video that he made after the video was released fell flat. And so that's why I think that regardless of the outcome or when he is released, I don't think Hollywood is waiting with open arms for him.
And then what about you're a journalist, but there were so many stories, so much on, I call it the social media tsunami beforehand of all these rumors with minors and all of these other things that were going on. Does that concern you about how that might influence people, in a big case like this, where these things they're right in your face? You pick up your phone and it's the first thing that pops up on your screen, whether you're following that person or subscribing or not.
Yeah, Lisa, you make a good point, because there's the court of law and then there's the court of public opinion. And in the court of public opinion, to a lot of people, he is still guilty. And there were a lot of allegations made in the civil lawsuits that he still also has to answer to, some involving minors, some involving just different things and abuse allegations, for example. And he still has to answer to that. But right now, the big hurdle that he was trying to overcome was not spending the rest of his life in prison. And so today, the judge is weighing if he will be able to walk out of these doors out on bail, but he's still looking up to 20 years in prison. So he still has a long road ahead.
10 years maximum on each count of the transportation for prostitution. Exactly. But what about the family effect? Because that was something that I tried to include in my stories. And then the first time in the courtroom, I saw, the daughters are there, the sons are there, not the little baby, but and the family, the show of support. They were obviously very, well coached in terms of just people are going to be yelling at you and just don't even pay any attention to it. Just keep walking straight, keep your dignity, which they did. But just that, what effect do you think that had on the jurors? And his mother, even some of the days when no one else was there, his mother, Mrs. Janice Combs, was there, even on the 105-degree day last week.
Yeah.
But what effect do you think that kind of show of a family around him, even despite these sensational allegations, had on the jury?
I think it had a huge effect. At one point during his closing argument, Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, pointed to the family. And he was trying to show that Diddy is not who the prosecution is painting him out to be. He is a man who helps people, that he helped people of color that worked in his businesses, was giving them opportunities, he said, before DEI was even a thing. And he said that is why his family, for example, and pointed right at them while they were sitting in the gallery, are here today supporting him because he takes care of people. And I think that really resonated with the jury. Another thing, too, is the mother of his twins and Christian Combs was brought up numerous times, his late girlfriend, Kim Porter.
Right.
And the prosecution was concerned that if the defense kept bringing her up, that the jury, in the back of their mind, would contemplate, well, the girls already lost, and mind you, they're 18 years old, they already lost their mother, and now they may potentially lose their father if he spends the rest of his life in prison. So I think that was a factor.
And that it played into that as well. Yeah. And then what about in terms of women, women looking at their own behavior and this whole culture of you pay me for this or pay me for that, and we're dating, but you're paying me. What about that? And that's not just limited to hip hop or to entertainment. That cuts across a lot of different cultures and a lot of different economic and demographics.
Yeah, there was a lot of social conversations that were going on, and this is why this case was so polarizing, right? So, for example, the defense did not hold back when it came to Jane, and they even said verbatim, Jane is a very different person than Cassie is. Mark Agnifilo said, Jane likes to do it for the gram. He said she wanted what she could get out of this relationship. He connected her to numerous famous rappers, for example.
Right.
And he kept bringing up the fact that she was jealous of women who were getting bigger Chanel bags than her.
Like Young Miami.
Like
right.
Young Miami, exactly. And that she always was would get upset with him, and most of their arguments would start from him taking another woman on a trip, for example. And so they highlighted that to show that she was a willing participant in all of this, and it was just a transactional relationship, for example.
Exactly. Well, Mona, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Mona Kosar Abdi, I got it right, okay, senior correspondent for Extra. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your experience with us on this. We really appreciate it. Back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Lisa, for that insight. And as we get ready to readjust, keep in mind that we will keep you covered right here. As to the latest happenings, the judges asked for both parties to give him paperwork by 1 o'clock, which is just over an hour from now, and then he will make a decision as to whether or not Diddy will be released on bail today or be held on still in prison or in the detention center.
The Brooklyn Detention Center,
right,
yeah.
Until this case is decided as far as sentencing goes. We'll have more on that. The noon comes your way in just a few minutes right now. Wow. Kurt Menefee, Rosanna Scotto, Seth Zuckerman still with us here. Seth, anything you want to wrap up here with as we get to the top of the hour?
I just think this is a huge win for Diddy, right? He was convicted of only the 2 prostitution counts and was found not guilty of both the RICO racketeering and the sex trafficking counts. That's a huge win. There's no mandatory minimum prison sentence at this point.
So the judge could give him a few months.
The judge could give him a few months.
Or no time at all, right?
Correct. There'll be
time served.
I would find that hard to believe, but it's absolutely possible. The sentencing guidelines will call for a few years. And there's a maximum of 10 on each count, which can be done consecutively, which is why he faces up to 20 years. But this is a huge win.
I think the women's groups are going to be so angry right now over what Cassie Ventura endured. We saw the videotape in the hallway. That was just a sampling of what went on behind closed doors. And
we heard more and more stories about it.
Right.
Not just with her. And, you know, we asked earlier today, we had Peter Feldman on.
Peter Frankel.
I just drew a blank here.
Okay.
All the names are running together all of a sudden. I apologize.
It's a long morning.
So one of the questions I asked him was, how big a factor do you think the video played? Because, you know, he was found guilty on the prostitution charge across state lines. You wonder if at some point the jury saw that video and the public saw that video, and they said, there's no way he's going to be found not guilty on everything. We've got to figure out something.
Well, I think the prosecution may have overplayed their hand here, Kurt. They showed that video again and again and again.
At the beginning and the end.
And to the point that the jurors actually could become numb to it. The first time you saw that video, we were all shocked and appalled, right? But when you see that video 5, 6, 10, 20 times, you kind of become numb to it a little bit. And I think the prosecution may have made a misstep by showing it so many times in this case that I don't think the video played as large of a role as everyone thought that it would play, that it played. Now, there's also a school of thought that the video should not have been allowed into evidence to begin with. It was a very prejudicial video, and it didn't go directly to the counts that he was charged with. Obviously, the judge made an evidentiary determination to allow it in based on the racketeering charge, and the jury saw it. But I think the government made a misstep by showing it so many times that I think the jury may have become numb to it by the end.
All right, Seth, thank you so much for, summarizing and giving us an idea of what might be going on behind closed doors right now as we speak. We're going to continue our coverage. Bianca Peters is here. We're on the Fox Local app. If you don't have it, get it now. It's free. And we will be continuing coverage.
And Bianca's going to have more on the noon. Of course, 5, 6, 10 o'clock tonight. We will